Okay, we are going to embark on a functional analysis of a particular text, and I will be using this text that I used in another video for the study of propositions. And what we're going to do is we're going to conduct a Schepa-Grell-esque inquiry into the text, and I kind of had to reflect a little bit on it before I made this video, so this was a bit of a challenge for me too. I had to go off and make a cup of tea and decide how I was going to go about this. So let me model for you the strategy that I've come up with, and I think you might find it useful too as you go about investigating texts. So we're going to conduct a functional analysis. Okay, and what that means is we're going to look at a text and we're going to try to figure out what its purpose is, and what the and that purpose is defined as a relationship between the author and the ideas, and the author and the reader and the ideas. So we're going to explore that purpose, this transaction of ideas, and the reasons for that transaction of ideas, and we are going to identify, like Schepa-Grell does, the linguistic mechanisms that mediate that. So I have a couple of starting questions. Again, functional analysis is about purpose. So I ask, to start, what's the purpose of the text that I'm reading? You know, somebody puts a book down in front of me, and that book has chapters and words in it. What do those words exist for? What do those chapters exist for? Okay. Do these chapters exist, or does the text passage exist to explain a cause and effect relationship, like you might find in a chemistry textbook? Okay. To recount a sequence of events, to persuade the reader of an idea, or simply perhaps even to describe relationships. We find those in science textbooks as well. We also find them in history textbooks. And this is not to say that a single text is here for just one purpose. In fact, what you might find is different aspects of texts, or different passages within texts, are going to provide different purposes. Give examples of something. Okay, so purposes of the text overall. Then we move on to another question that's going to guide me in my inquiry. What is the author's or narrator's stance? Okay, and so by stance, it's kind of like another way of saying attitude, or agenda. So what is the author's or narrator's stance in relation to the ideas within this broader purpose? Does the author position him or herself as omniscient and paternalistic and having a full grasp of the issues, and is just laying them out for us? Is that author trying to make sense of a phenomenon and is indicating to the reader, hey, I'm just trying to make sense of this. I'm a novice to this as you are, and therefore we together are in a process of discovery. And then when we look, or when we focus on the relationship with the reader, does the author pose him or herself as an objective and transparent messenger of facts, like we might expect to find in definitely in science textbooks, and to what degree in history textbooks? Are the facts just the facts? Is history the way it is? Well, we've come a long way in the presentation of history concepts to recognize that there is an interpretation of history. And so things are not as subjective or objective as we would once believe historically. But still, the authorial voice, how is that author presenting him or herself to the reader? Is the author presenting him or herself as subjective and wanting the reader to share in the discovery and the interpretation? Okay. That is to say, hey, I'm discovering these ideas and I want you to participate in a dialogue with me and help me think through these ideas. Okay. When an author's doing that, texts take on a very different flavor. Okay. You're going to find things like more modal verbs and hedging devices. That is to say, things that make the author sound like they're making suggestions. You know, these are some ideas I'm just throwing out. Maybe we can consider them as true, but possibly not. And so you find that's hedging. Or does the author feel they are someone who feels compelled to keep the reader entertained or interested? Okay. Who's doing the work here in order to make the connection? Is the author working hard to make sure that the reader connects with the text? Or is the author not working hard and saying, you know, the reader has a responsibility to create their own energy and find their way through the text, and my job as an author is just to present the ideas? And this kind of gets at the sense of what's called reader versus writer responsibility. And I will say that the notion of who's responsible for possessing the background knowledge, who is responsible for summoning up the energy for persisting through a text, that varies from culture to culture and from genre to genre. Okay. For example, in Chinese and actually a lot of Asian cultures, it's the reader's responsibility to actually work hard to figure out what the author is trying to explain. The author is often posed as somebody who knows all the facts, knows all of the issues, and is doing the reader a favor by tipping their hand. But in fact, if the reader can't catch on, then it's the reader's fault that they don't know enough. Okay? In the United States, on the other hand, we work very hard to make things crystal clear. The third question, which is really where we jump in once we get an overview of the text that we're studying, and we've kind of we've settled on some ideas. Well, then the next question is, what are the actual linguistic devices that systematically, and by systematically I mean that are done with regular patterns of lexicon, of grammar, of sentence structure, of paragraph structure. What are the linguistic devices that cue us into this interpretation? Okay. What are that is to say, cue in our interpretation of this relationship between reader and writer, and cue the relationship between the writer and the facts themselves, or the writer and the propositions themselves. Okay. So we're looking at now this is where the rubber hits the road, if you will. We are saying let's identify the characteristics of the texts that convey these ideas. That is to say, the propositions themselves, and how we and the author relate to those ideas or propositions, and how we relate to how the author and the reader relate to each other. Okay. Now, there was a question that came up about the concept of register. Okay. And what we have done is we have said that this text has a purpose. All right? And this purpose is constituted by ideas and relationships. And then we are saying that these ideas and relationships are indicated to us by a linguistic code. All right? A systematic linguistic variety. So when we look at this definition of a register, thank you, Wikipedia, A register is a variety of language used for a particular purpose in a particular social setting. Okay? It's a dialect. It is a set of, it is a collection of language patterns, lexical, grammatical, that are aligned under the purpose of conveying an author's stance and relaying ideas in a genre-specific way. Okay, and particular social setting. So instead of two people talking, that's a social setting. We're actually substituting the word genre here. Okay, because it's not going to be a social setting. It's a textbook. But essentially, that's what we're kind of working with here. It's a variety that's used for the particular purpose of writing. A register is a variety of language used for a particular purpose of communicating in a social setting. Okay, so I hope that clears it up. Now we move on to the task of text analysis, and I'll start part 2 of this video in just a moment. Okay, while I'm starting part 2, we see that this is a, let's look at this title, Post-Katrina Vietnamese Success. All right, what purposes, maybe I should rewrite this. What purposes does this title indicate for the upcoming text? Okay, you know, so when you're asking your student readers, you know, hey everybody, let's just stop as a pre-reading activity. Let's look at the title. What do you think's gonna happen? Okay, we are doing exactly the same thing. What do you think's gonna happen in the text? The students tell you what they think is gonna happen in the text. I too am asking you not only what's gonna happen in the text, that is to say, what are the propositions that are occurring in the text. Sorry, I was looking for something up there. You know, what are the propositions? What are the ideas? What are the events? Okay, but also I'm asking sort of the level 2 version of this is what are these other characteristics that are being communicated by a title? So while we switch over to the next video, why don't you think about that one for a second? Okay, because the text is going to tell you about, just scanning very quickly, it's going to tell you about a Vietnamese enclave of Village de l'Est in New Orleans, and about Vietnamese Americans. All right, I'm going to leave it at that for now.